Buzzboy stabbing buzzboy, customer beating up customer, waiters duking it out on the dining room floor. I've seen it all. But never have I seen such a shameful synergy of truly awful things happen, and in such spectacular fashion as on New Year's Eve 1991, a date that surely deserved to live in New York restaurant infamy. It was the all-time award-winning jumbo-sized restaurant Trainwreck, a night where absolutely everything went wrong that could go wrong, where the greatest number of people got hurt, and an entire kitchen bowed its head in shame and fear, while outside the kitchen doors, waiters trembled at the slaughterhouse their once hushed and elegant dining room had become. Like Operation Market Garden or Stalingrad or the musicals of Andrew Lloyd Webber, responsibility for the disaster that followed rests ultimately with one man. In this case, it was a talented and resourceful chef we'll call Bobby Thomas. Bobby had the idea that he could create an ambitious menu, as good as his always excellent a la carte menus, and serve it to 350 people who would be filling the restaurant we'll call nightclub. He also felt confident enough in his abilities that he could pretty much wait till the last minute to put the whole thing together. You know, the little details like telling his staff what the fuck they were going to be serving and how. In his visionary wisdom, Bobby did not share his thinking or his plans with others. Like the strategic brainiacs who thought invading Russia to be a good idea, he was undisturbed by useful details. Mein Führer, are you aware winter is coming? I arrived at nightclub a half hour before the shift, the other cooks trickling in after me. We put on our whites, cranked up the radio, and as usual stood around waiting for someone to tell us what to do. Our leader had characteristically neglected to entrust us with a prep list. So we did what cooks left unbriefed and unsupervised tend to do, which was stand around gossiping. The lobsters arrived first. There were cases of them reaching to the ceiling, lobsters skittering around under wet newspaper and heaps of crushed ice. Since I was de facto quartermaster and the guy who signed for such things, the cooks, Frankie Five Angels, Matt, Orlando, Steven, Adam, and Doc Boy all stood around there expectantly looking at me, waiting for instructions as a puddle of water grew larger and larger from the rapidly melting ice. But what do we do with them? Who knows? Bobby hadn't left the prep list. Do we blanch them, cook them all the way, chop them, split them, turn the damn things into bisque? We don't know, because Bobby hadn't left a menu. The game arrived next. Boned out poussin, duck breasts, bones, a case of foie gras. We cleaned up the duck breasts nicely, put on stock with the bones, well that didn't take much to surmise, and laid out the poussin on sheet pans and got everything in a walk-in for when Bobby would show up. We wanted to get started on the foie gras, loaves of the stuff, but were we making terrine, which would require us to open them up and start yanking out veins, or were we leaving them whole for pan searing? We didn't know. And once you tear open a liver, you can't untear it. So we left those alone. When the meat order arrived, we cleaned up the tenderloins but left them whole, not having any idea of portion size, whether we were making filet mignon or tournedos or chateaubriand or beef fucking Wellington for that matter. When the produce order came in, it was getting toward panic time. 2 cases of oranges, 1 case of lemons, 10 cases of lettuce, Belgian Andes, fennel, wild mushrooms, the ubiquitous baby zucchinis, yellow and patty pan squash, baby carrots. Dry goods followed, an unpenetrable heap of long-haul purchases, fryer oil, salad oil, vinegar, flour, canned goods. There was no way of knowing what was for today and what was for next week. We peeled the carrots. It was 2 o'clock now, cocaine and indecision grinding the heart right out of the afternoon, and still no Bobby. Time passed. We continued to set up as best we could. At 4:30, Bobby finally rolled in. I say rolled in because Bobby was on rollerblades wearing a new Blues Traveler tour jacket, and that charming little boy smile that had so successfully helped convince a legion of hostesses and floor staff to come into close contact with his genitals. We, however, were not so charmed. Bobby, what's the menu? I asked. Would really kind of like to know. Bobby just smiled and skated back to his office and emerged a few minutes later in his whites, bearing the fatal document. New Year's Eve menu, 1992. Oysters baked in champagne sauce with beluga caviar, foie gras with apricot chutney, port wine sauce, toasted brioche, beggars' purses of diverse scallops and wild mushrooms, truffle soup, followed by Dover sole with citrus beurre, lobster in a shellfish nage with fennel, chestnut and truffle stuffed poussin with foie gras sauce, Chateaubriand Rossini, followed by Harlequin soufflé, New Year's parfait, lemon tart, sweet delicacies du chef. Our fearless leader brimmed with insouciance that we took for confidence. My concerns were dismissed, understandably given my pessimistic nature and my kitchen nickname of the time, Dr. Doom. Bobby curtly gave us our prep assignments and a brief rundown of how he expected us to prepare and present his creations. To our credit, we quickly put our stations together, set up our mise en place, dug in, and by 7 we were loaded and ready for the first orders. Half an hour later, there were still no tickets. The little printer hooked up to the waiter's computer order system lay silent. Our 2 runners, Manuel and Ed, informed us that the guests were arriving. The dining room was filling up. "Tell them to get those orders in," snarled Bobby. "Let's knock down some early tables, come on." But nothing happened. A half hour passed, then an hour. It would be a long night. The first orders came in at 8:30. Ordering 1 oysters, 2 foie gras, 1 scallop, followed by 3 sole, 1 lobster, 1 chateau, 1 poussin. 2 more oysters, 2 more foie, 3 Dover soles, 1 lobster. And already I'm getting worried they seem to be hitting the sole hard. Each order took up a whole burner, meaning we could only cook 4 at a time. The machine was printing full bore now, paper spitting out end over end, and Bobby calling it all out and stuffing copies in the slide. So far we were keeping up, racing to drill out what we could before it really hit the fan. Still, no main courses had been fired yet. I looked over and saw that Frankie was already in the weeds, spazzing out on all the foie gras orders, and that the truffle soup was not cooking as fast as anticipated. Frankie was so high he was shaking, and Frankie wasn't so good at keeping orders in his head anyway, so the combination of minor frustrations and all those foie gras orders was taking its toll. And the printer kept clicking, and the stack of orders that Bobby had yet to even call out kept getting bigger and bigger, and it was clear, with not a single main course served or even fired, that we were headed for collision. Bobby's reaction to the ensuing crisis was to turn on Frankie. Forcefully. Too forcefully, considering Frankie's known pathologies. "Where's that foie, you idiot? What the fuck is up with that fucking foie? What's wrong with you, Frank? Frank, where's that fucking foie gras?" Poor Frankie, he was spinning in place, trying to do 10 things at once, succeeding at none, eyes banging around in his skull, sweat pouring down his face, a dervish of confusion, the little 4-burner stove full of melting foie gras. And the printer all the while still... The first of the front waiters appeared, inquiring fearfully about app orders, which made Bobby even crazier. There were easily 50 tables worth of orders up on the board. God knows how many in Bobby's hand, and a long white strip of them curling onto the floor that Bobby had yet to even acknowledge. And nothing was coming out of the kitchen. Nothing. When the next waiters came in asking for food, Bobby boiled over. Just get out! Get out of the fucking kitchen! He then issued orders for Matt to take on some of the foie gras orders, put Dougie in exclusive charge of the toaster, told Orlando and Stephen both to get out of the way, and took over the stove himself while abandoning ordering responsibility to me. Fortunately, the printer had calmed down. Strange, but I sure was thankful, figuring that maybe, just maybe, we'd actually gone through the whole dining room. No, the printer. There must be something wrong with the printer. It was too quiet. It had been too long since the last order. Not a click or a clack for what, 20 minutes? I checked the roll of paper. No jam, looks fine. It's unplugged. Bobby must have tripped over the cord. I plugged it back in. Immediately the machine came alive, clicking away like nobody's business, spitting out orders in a terrifying, unending stream, one after the other, after the other, after the other, faster than I could tear them off. A constant flow of backed up orders we hadn't even heard about. Staring at the paper cascading out of the printer, it was clear to all of us by now that we were involved in a complete disaster. The situation was beyond saving. Then I looked over by the kitchen doors. Veronica, our best waitress, was red-faced and shaking. "A customer choked me," she cried, eyes filling up with tears. "He stood up, he put his hands around my neck and fucking choked me, screaming, 'Where's my fucking food?' Tony, it's out of control." The kitchen doors swung open. It was Larry, the waiter, with tears running down his face. Now this was about as bad a sign as you could see. Larry only moonlighted as a waiter. His day job was as a cop on the Lower East Side. What on the floor of a restaurant could be so bad, so frightful, so monstrous as to cause a 10-year veteran of the police force, a guy who'd been jumped twice in the line of duty, to become so traumatized? "They're beating the customers," Larry wailed. "People are getting up, trying to leave, and security's beating them. They're fucking going nuts." That this was a tonier crowd was a distinction they could hardly be expected to make, especially since the customers were drunk and very pissed off at having spent hundreds of dollars for nothing, and they were heading for the doors in droves. Still, it never looks good when your staff is dealing out beatdowns to middle-aged couples from the suburbs who only wanted a nice New Year's Eve and some swing music. We tried. We did the best we could. To his credit, Bobby cooked as hard and as fast as he could until the very end, pretty much doing everything himself, unwilling or unable to trust anyone to help him out of the hole he himself had dug. We served eventually a lot of undercooked foie gras, leathery Dover sole, overcooked lobster, lukewarm beef and birds. Very few desserts. Most of the room was empty before dessert was even ordered. 1991 slipped into 1992 without notice or mention in the kitchen. No one dared speak. The word happy in relation to anything would have felt inappropriate. At 12:45, in what was perhaps the perfect coda to the evening, a lone, bespectacled customer in a rumpled tuxedo entered the kitchen and, peering at the dried foie gras on the stove, asked, "Pardon me, I don't want to intrude, but might this be my appetizer?" He'd been waiting for it for 4 hours. We gave him a dessert. He thanked us profusely.